Is Mr. Adams again here to check in with you, to give you a little bit of update on some things, and just in general to say hello. I have the answers of the last supplemental bonus, which was over disease. I have another supplemental bonus for you to be able to answer. Also, let me say at the outset that I have embedded within this video three times, not necessarily at any particular time. I'm going to say a fruit, and there's going to be a quiz on Canvas that if you then fill out what those three fruits are that show to me that you watched the video in its duration, then you are going to be able to get a free 100. If you answer the bonus questions at the end, also via Canvas, whether you get them right or wrong, I will give you 10 extra points on top of that. So 110 just for simply watching this video, remembering what the fruits were. So first and foremost, there was another grade posting. There's still 1/8 of the year left, so there's still plenty of time, but I have good news in that of the 39 Latin 2 students that I teach, 21 raised their average. Some of the raises was rather modest, like only a point. Some people raised their average up to 6 points, those things like that. But let me again say how appreciative and how proud I am of those of you who keep putting in the work. And let me again reiterate that I am planning to do as much as I can to help you. There's still a lot that I can do in this last 1/8 of the year, a lot that you can do. Keep up the good work. I've taken note of specifically those of you who have been working on Canvas. I can see it. I'm going to reach out to many of you personally over the next couple of days, but let me tell you, keep it up. If there anything specifically that you would like to retake, to go ahead and put those requests in. I'm more than happy to put those online for you, things like that. But I really can see, and I specifically those who have been putting in the work. I've noticed it. I've taken note of it. I'm going to do a lot to help you and be very generous here in the last semester. Oh, get away. Nevertheless, so a couple of things. One, that you can still have the two options. Option number one is doing the subjunctives. I really encourage, if you plan at all, to maybe go into AP Latin, and hopefully you will, some of you, or if you just in general would like to know about your own language better, to take the route and learn. Listen to the recordings that I've made, the videos that I've made explaining things this week, like cum clauses and direct questions. There'll be ut clauses up next week, and then moving after that, some passages with the subjunctive to hopefully allow you to get better at it, and we'll treat those just like as though they were from the chapters of Ecce Romani. For all intents and purposes, we have 3 weeks left of assignments, and certainly I think that we can end with a bang, and I plan on trying to reward you handsomely. Also, in all future recordings, I think that I'm going to embed within them certain cues that you could then fill out a form on Canvas to reward you for watching the video and hopefully benefiting from it. Again, if you have any requests for me for things that we've had previously that you would like to retake, a word about that though. Retaking something here and there and bringing it up from like a 71 to a 90 is not going to help you that much. Just look at the numbers of how the math works out. But if you can isolate stuff, a lot of things, let's say vocab quizzes, and bring a 25 up to a 95, that can help move the needle quite a bit more. Some of you have used that to your advantage. The major exam that I have online has really helped out some of you in bringing up your major exam average. And so I really encourage those of you to take advantage of the things on Canvas. I really do appreciate and have seen the ones of you who have been doing that sort of stuff like that. The question that becomes too, those of you who have your high average, why would you keep working? Well, I've already seen instances of a 99 has already gone to a 100 some person. I've seen a couple of 96s go to 98s. I've seen 89s go to 92s. I keep glancing down and I'm looking at them right there on the page. And even if you have a 100, it's like this. That for me, at any rate, the part of school that I hated was the one, pointless work, and hopefully you come to realize I'll never give you that, and two, the stress of the grades, the stress of doing poorly. However, what I did love is learning. I like learning new things, understanding things better. It makes the world easier to understand around me. And hopefully you see that somewhat of an ease that I have in understanding the world around me because of the fact that I do like learning new things. And so for me, this would be a dream opportunity in that I could learn without any stress. There's no danger of my grade going down. I do something on Canvas, I don't do well on it, I'm not going to put it into the grade book if it's something that would not help your average. And so this is an opportunity that you really can take advantage of the fact that there's no dangers of going backwards. So please just consider that and keep up the good work. And I'm going to have more for you on there. Not anything to hopefully overburden you, but again, opportunity only for rewards. So the first fruit is peaches. There'll be 2 more. So if you remember that, you can fill out a form on Canvas. So what I would like to do now is go over the supplemental bonus from last time. It was diseases. There was a grand total in Latin 2 of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of y'all who submitted your answer. Hopefully we can have more this time. But I'll go over it as I have it now. My trusty post-it note. Number 1 on the category of disease was, what was the first line of the Hippocratic Oath? First, do no harm. As a doctor, your first thing you're supposed to do is don't make things worse. No need to take chances or experiment. It's one thing to be able to help, but if you can't help, just don't harm. Don't make things worse, and that's it. Number 2, the disease that kills more people in the United States on a yearly basis is heart disease. All the things that can complicate your health with heart disease. So that's why we've got to do everything we can to remain healthy, heart healthy, eat right, exercise, stuff like that because of heart disease. Number 3, the American Lung Association was created to first combat tuberculosis, also known as consumption, and it's a skin test. I said it was an organ and a rather large one, and your skin is one of your largest, if not the largest organ of your body, and so therefore you have to take a skin test. Number 4, I asked about STDs, sexually transmitted diseases. You probably learned about those in health class. They used to be known as venereal diseases. They were named after the goddess Venus, the goddess of love. That's right there in the way that obviously those are transmitted. Number 5, corona of coronavirus means crown. The virus itself under a microscope kind of looks like the corona of the sun, the crown of the sun. And so it's the shape of it that gives it its name. Number 6, I talked about Tay-Sachs disease and how it disproportionately affects an ethnicity known as Ashkenazi. The Ashkenazi are originally from Central Europe, and they are Jewish people. Jewish people are Ashkenazi. Tons and tons of now Ashkenazi in the United States. And unfortunately, as we know, that was the ethnicity that bore the brunt of the Holocaust. Number 7, polio is the disease that is sought to be eradicated by the works of the Rotary Club. And the 2 places in the world that's still hard to stamp out are, of course, Afghanistan and Pakistan. That's where most of the cases are. So if you listed one of those 2, it was correct. If we get eliminate that, we can eliminate polio on Earth, kind of like what we've done with smallpox in the 70s. Number 8, the Susan Komen Foundation, specifically, that's breast cancer. They're the ones who are in the fight against breast cancer. Number 9, I asked what disease are unique to humans and armadillos of all things. Mentioned in the Bible quite a bit. That's leprosy. And then finally, the most famous epidemic, or at least one of, the bubonic plague. I asked for either the century. The years were 1347, 1348, 1349, so the 14th century or 1300s. And the 2 animals responsible for the transmission of it were fleas, who carried the disease, and the hosts of those fleas, which were rats, as it were. So now we're going to move on to our supplemental bonus for this week. And your second fruit is blueberries. So hopefully you will remember that. And by being able to put in the 3 fruits again on Canvas, you will be able to earn a free 100. And if you attempt this supplemental bonus as well, additionally, I'll add 10 extra points to it, whether you get all of them or any of them right. So your category of the supplemental bonus for today is spring, as in springtime, or other things as well later on in the bonus. Number 1 for spring. I chose this category because As much as it is terrible to be in this pandemic and isolated at home and the like, at least on many of the days, the weather has been gorgeous. I do my recordings outside. We had class meetings outside. And again, tomorrow at 2 p.m., I'm going to send out a Zoom link if anybody wants to come to a class meeting and ask questions, just say hello, kind of like last time, won't last long. But I like them to be outside. The weather is beautiful. And that's one silver lining. Going to be raining tomorrow, I think, though. But I'll see what I can set up to maybe I'll still be outside. You never know. Okay, so spring is your category. Number one, within 50%. The spring is very often looked at by some as a terrible time because of the pollen. And we're, I think, through the worst of it. But on a daily basis in the springtime this year, I've been checking the pollen count. Our school nurse usually sends out an email that has the pollen count for a particular day. And that pollen count, the highest on record, I think, was earlier this spring, near the end of March. And so within 50%, what was the pollen count at its highest this spring? Now, by that, I mean, if it were a 100, the pollen count was not a 100. It was much higher than that. I would have accepted either 50 to 150 because that's within 50% of 100. So within 50%, what is the pollen count high that we experienced this year that is close to a record? Number two, one of my favorite painters, if not my favorite, is a fellow by the name of Alessandro Botticelli. I fell in love with him when I was in 11th grade. He is a Renaissance painter from Italy, particularly Florence of the 1400s, 15th century. And if you want to see his paintings, there's a museum that you go to called the Uffizi. It's right on the shore of the Arno, or the bank of the Arno River in Florence. And there's one room that is called the Botticelli room. And when I entered it for the first time, I almost wept. I was overwhelmed. And I would argue his most famous painting is called The Birth of Venus. It shows the birth of that goddess from the sea foam, riding like a surfboard, a shell to the island of Cytherea. But I would argue his second most famous painting is called La Primavera, which is Italian for spring. But your question for number two is, what literally does primavera translate as from the Italian? La primavera means literally what? Two words in English. Number three, we're in the month of April, one of 2 months completely within the season of spring. And the very first week of Latin 1, we talked about the development of English. And there was a work whose first lines we read. And those lines were, Juan dat April with his sure suit, and the root of Mart hath perthrut, and bathed every vein in switch liqueur, of which engendered is the fluor, or something of that nature. And so your question is, either name that work from which those lines come, or the author of those lines. So either one of those. Either one. So number four. I'm going to pause this for just a second. I had to plug in my laptop, was losing juice. So number four, this spring, and every spring, there is something called a Seder, and Seder. And so my question would be, with what would you be participating in if you were a part of the Seder? And so that's, again, if you're part of the Seder, you're a part of what larger thing? Number five, every single spring that I can remember my lifetime, ABC, the television station, on a Saturday night broadcasts a movie that's like 4 hours long. It's a rather old movie. It stars old movie stars like Charlton Heston, Yul Brynner, Edward G. Robinson. And this year, my family, my children, actually watched it, all of it. Now, not all in one night, not in that singular night. My wife recorded it, and so therefore on consecutive nights, we went through the whole thing. But what is that movie that every single spring on a Saturday night, you can count on this movie being broadcast? Number six. I love spring, except for one, the pollen, and two, there's an animal that shows up at my house. And it is the bane of my existence. And you have to be specific on this animal. Now, to give you a hint as to what this animal is, and that's the question, what is this animal that I hate? One, this animal has quite the affinity for cellulose. And secondly, is that this animal is often confused with another animal. Now, the other animal with which it is confused, to give you a hint on it, the character from the Harry Potter world, Albus Dumbledore, has his name Albus because of the white hair that he has. That's the Latin word for white. But Dumbledore is also derivative from a Latin word that is a particular animal, and the animal that I have as the bane of my existence is often confused with that animal from which Dumbledore comes. So, what is this animal that I absolutely hate, shows up every spring, and has an affinity for cellulose? Number 7, we're going to switch gears a bit on spring and make it to where we talk about spring as in the providers of water. An aquifer is, I suppose, could be a source of a spring that is an underwater reservoir or even like an underwater river. And the most famous, I would argue, and biggest aquifer, and one of the largest in the entire world, is called the Ogallala Aquifer. It holds a tremendous amount of water. And the Ogallala Aquifer is actually underneath parts of 8 different states. So your question is to name any state that one could find a part of the Ogallala. However, there is one state that has the majority of it and has the epicenter of the Ogallala. And if you name that particular state, you will get triple credit. So what is the state, any state of the 8 that are a part of the Ogallala? All right, now the next one's a little bit convoluted, but the spring of a spring that's the mechanical device that, you know, you could compress and decompress. I learned this from Quiz Bowl that anytime I start hearing something about springs, there is a law that is inevitably the answer. And this law is named after a particular person, and so it's Planck's law, like Newton's law, but the answer is not Newton, obviously. Whose law is the law that tells us and dictates to us about the physics of a spring? To give you a hint on this man's name can refer to an object that I've used in my lifetime known as a treble. It also is the name of a character, a titular character. That means that the character is also the name of the work, in this case a movie, in which Dustin Hoffman played the titular character opposite of the protagonist, who was played by Robin Williams. And then also this man's name can lend itself to a part of a song. So what is that name common to all of those? Treble, Dustin Hoffman's titular character in a movie that I kind of like, that he plays opposite and the antagonist to Robin Williams' character. And also it is the part of a song, all with the same term. Whose law tells us about springs? Number 9. A spring that is a famous one can be found in Rome. And it is actually found in Rome's prison. Rome did not think of long-term incarceration like what we do. You're held in prison until it's time for your execution or time that you can be freed due to trial. And there was a prison, it was no bigger than essentially my room at school, and it was called the Mamertine prison, or the Tullianum, because supposedly the 6th king, Servius Tullius, built it. And essentially it was underground, and there was one hole in the roof to where they would let down the prisoners or pull them back up. And on top of this prison now is a church, and people don't realize it's there, but if you're ever in Rome and you're in the Roman Forum, make sure you stop by and just see it. And the church that is built on top of it is called San Pietro in Carcere, which is St. Peter's in prison, because, according to legend, St. Peter was held in that prison. And so my question is, in that prison, if you go down in it, there is a spring that, according to legend again, Peter had caused, due to miracle, to come bubbling up. And thus the question is, for what specific purpose did that spring bubble up in the Mamertine prison, or the Tullianum, if you would like? Finally, number 10. In the late 1600s, 1700s, there was an author, a rather famous one. He was an Englishman. His name was Alexander Pope. And of course, the joke is that if you're great enough as an English citizen, you are buried in the most famous place, which is Westminster. It's where all the kings are buried, where all the queens are buried. Um, uh, Famous poets are. There's a whole section of Westminster Abbey. It's this giant cathedral right next to the Houses of Parliament in Big Ben in London, and they have an actual corner of it called Poets' Corner, where they bury all the poets. Shakespeare is buried there, and so is Alexander Pope. And the silly trivia question is, who's the only pope buried in Westminster Abbey? Well, all the popes are buried in St. Peter's Basilica, and so the answer is always Alexander Pope, and so that's the big joke. But Alexander Pope, who is the man who gave the eulogy of Shakespeare's funeral, has a famous quote that I very much like, and it's "Blank springs eternal in the human breast." And so I forget from where it comes, maybe not essay concerning human understanding, something like that. But what is it that springs eternal from the human breast that we get from Alexander Pope, a short fellow, only about 5 feet flat, and incredibly sharp-witted, and could be intolerant of fools. He did not suffer fools gladly. But what springs eternal? So your last fruit is plums. So if you can remember the 3 fruits, go on Canvas and fill out the form, and hopefully try your answers at these bonuses. Hopefully I'll see you tomorrow at 2 p.m. Thursday is our usual meeting. And nevertheless, again, I appreciate all the work that y'all been putting on Canvas. I encourage you to keep it up. I see it. I recognize it. It's not going unrecognized. And like I said, for the next day or two, I hopefully will reach out to you individually and tell you how much I appreciate the work that you've been doing. So nevertheless, I hope you've enjoyed the video. And for watching it, go and find those 3 fruits, enter them in, try your hand at the bonus, and hopefully I'll see you tomorrow. So